What's up, everybody out there? It's the NFLExporter, and you're now listening to the debut edition of the Firehouse Sports Talk Show live on Blaze1Radio. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, just for you, Blaze1Radio now has a sports talk show. We're going to be covering the NFL as well as fantasy football. So for all my NFL fans, for all my fantasy football owners and GMs out there, you want to make sure to burn it down with us each and every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. live here on Blaze1Radio. I got to give a big shout out and thanks to the big homie Gordon Mills and the whole Blaze1 family. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we return, we're going to go over our quarterback rankings in fantasy football. So don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody, and once again it's the debut edition of the Firehouse Sports Talk Show on Blaze1Radio with your host, the NFLExporter. Let's go ahead and jump into our quarterback rankings in fantasy football. Number 1 is Peyton Manning of the Denver Broncos. Last year, Manning had over 5,000 yards passing with over 50 touchdown passes to break the NFL record for passing yards and passing touchdowns in the season. Manning also scooped up another MVP award, and his Denver Broncos came up one game short of winning it all last year. This year, Manning is restocked with his firepower, and we certainly expect another big year from Manning. I don't expect him to break his own record, which probably will stand for a very long time, but he certainly is capable for passing for 5,000 yards and 40 TDs. Without question, Manning is the top quarterback coming into fantasy football this season. Next on the board, we have Drew Brees of the New Orleans Saints. Brees is the only quarterback in NFL history with multiple seasons of passing for over 5,000 yards, and it was his record that Peyton Manning broke last year. So you know that Brees is capable of putting up the numbers, especially when the Saints play in the Superdome. Without question, Brees will be passing for over 4,000 yards and at least 30 touchdown passes again. If you don't get a chance to get Peyton Manning, Drew Brees certainly is a quarterback who is second to none. Next in line is Tom Brady of the New England Patriots. Last year, Brady had a good season with 4,343 yards and 25 TDs to only 11 interceptions. The numbers were down a little bit for Brady, but he certainly had not his normal cast of skill position players. Injuries were the main name of the game last year for the Patriots. He was without his favorite target, Rob Gronkowski. He also had Danny Amendola fight through some injuries, as well as his two rookies, Kimbrell Tompkins and Aaron Dobson. But this year, everybody is back on board for the Patriots, including running back Shane Vereen, who also missed the majority of last season. We know that Tom Brady is certainly a player with pride, and I expect for him to get back on track and have a huge season for the New England Patriots. Next, we have Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. We all know that Rodgers is one of the most precision passers and surgeons in the league. He has a legitimate running game behind him now. And even though he's lost a couple weapons over the years, he still has 3 targets in Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Jarrett Boykin. And we know that Rodgers is also the best quarterback in the league at throwing on the run. If you have Aaron Rodgers under center, you know that you can't go wrong. Next in line, we have Matthew Stafford of the Detroit Lions. Stafford is a player who's thrown for almost 10,000 yards in his past 2 seasons. Always puts up the big numbers, especially with Megatron Calvin Johnson as his main target. The only thing that hurts Stafford is the interceptions and turnovers. If he can cut that down and clean up some of the silly mistakes, don't be surprised to see Stafford ranking ahead of Aaron Rodgers this year and possibly even Tom Brady. Next in line, we have Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers. Kaepernick last year is another quarterback who played the majority of the season without his main weapons, but this year all engines are ready to fire. He has Michael Crabtree, Anquan Bolden, was able to bring over Steve Johnson from the Buffalo Bills, has one of the best tight ends in the game with Vernon Davis, a great offensive line, and a stout running game. Kaepernick also can get it done with his feet on the ground. I certainly expect a big year from Colin Kaepernick out in San Francisco. Next in line, we have Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears. Cutler has arguably the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL with Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffries. Those two players put up the best combined numbers from wide receivers last year. Cutler missed a lot of time last year due to injury, but he also has Matt Forte, Pro Bowl running back, behind him, and a very good tight end in Martellus Bennett. I certainly expect if Cutler can make it through the season healthy, as well as the skill position players, Jay Cutler is certainly going to be one of the best value picks in fantasy football this year. Next in line, we have Robert Griffin III of the Washington Redskins. We all know that RG3 had a spectacular rookie season in 2012 before being injured in the regular season and suffering a very bad injury in a playoff game against Seattle. He came back last year and did fairly well, but he really wasn't 100%. Also didn't have a lot of targets in the passing game. This year, the Redskins went out and brought in Deshaun Jackson to couple up with Pierre Garçon, who caught over 100 balls last year. Second-year tight end Jordan Reed also is ready to explode if he can stay healthy. Griffith is back at 100%. His rookie year, he ran for over 800 yards. I certainly expect for Robert Griffith III to rebound. He also has one of the best running backs in the league in Alfred Morris. Definitely expect a big year for Robert Griffith III. Next in line, I have Tony Romo of the Dallas Cowboys. Romo had another great individual season last year, throwing 31 TD passes to only 10 interceptions. Has one of the top wide receivers in the NFL in Dez Bryant. He also has second-year guy Terrence Williams, future Hall of Fame tight end Jason Witten. And if he can stay healthy, DeMarco Murray is one of the better running backs in the NFL. We know there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Romo and the Cowboys offense to put up numbers. They have one of the worst defenses on paper coming into the league. And so I certainly expect for Tony Romo to come out and put up the big numbers again. Next, we have Nick Foles of the Philadelphia Eagles. Foles last year had the third best season ever for an NFL quarterback, throwing 27 touchdown passes and only 2 interceptions. You certainly don't expect for Foles, or any quarterback for that matter, to only throw 2 interceptions throughout a 16-game schedule. But Foles certainly should be in a better position this year. He came in last year after Michael Vick got hurt. Coming into this season, he's the unquestioned starter on his team. He has second-year head coach Chip Kelly. He'll be more familiar with his offense. And even though the Eagles lost Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin is a speed guy as well, who, if can stay healthy, has certainly shown to be productive. He also has one of the top 2 running backs in the NFL, LaShawn Shady McCoy, who led the NFL in rushing last year. The Eagles also brought in Darren Sproles, who is a running back who averaged 77 catches a year over the last 3 seasons when he was in New Orleans. So I certainly expect for Nick Foles to put up some big numbers again this year. Next, we have Matt Ryan. That's right, Atlanta's own Matty Ice. In what was considered an off year for Ryan, he still passed for over 4,500 yards and 26 TD passes. He played the majority of last year without his top target Julio Jones. Pro Bowler Roddy White also missed a majority of the season due to injury. And so with both of those players back healthy, I expect for Ryan to be able to put up possibly some more yards, but definitely some more TD passes. The big loss that came for this offense and Matt Ryan, he'll be without future Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez, who was certainly his security blanket, a big target at 6'6" over the middle of the field and in the red zone. The Falcons certainly are going to have to find a way to make up for his production. I think Harry Douglas stepping into the slot can certainly help with that. Health is the main concern for this Atlanta offense. If they can stay healthy, certainly expect for Matty Ice to put up big numbers this year in Atlanta. Next in line, we have Andrew Luck of the Indianapolis Colts. Luck has certainly done nothing less than been spectacular in his first couple years in the NFL. Last year he had to play again without some major players. His main target, Reggie Wayne, missed the second half of the season due to injury. Also, tight end Dwayne Allen, who's very talented, coming into his third year, missed the entire season due to an injury. When you factor in that Wayne and Allen will both be there along with speedster T.Y. Hilton. You also have Kobe Fleener at tight end. And then in the offseason, they brought in Hakeem Nicks from the New York Giants. So Luck certainly has more than enough weapons in the passing game to make it happen through the air. And Luck is very underrated, what the damage he can do on the ground. He's certainly a guy who's able to get some rushing touchdowns as well. So I certainly like what Andrew Luck can bring to the table for your fantasy football team this season. Next in line, we have Phillip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers. After a couple shaky years for San Diego, Rivers was able to get back on track last year, throwing for over 4,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, and only 11 interceptions. A big reason that Rivers had his struggles was his offensive line was poor in pass protection, but they were much better last year, especially with the addition of their first-round pick, DJ Fluker. This year, Rivers has all of his weapons back, along with some players who have made some progress, and young tight end Ladarius Green. Second-year player Keenan Allen is due for a huge season. And also Malcolm Floyd missed the majority of the season due to injury. So when you bring back those players, I certainly expect for Phillip Rivers, if he can stay on his feet and get the protection, to put up another great year as far as fantasy football is concerned for the San Diego Chargers. Next in line, we have Andy Dalton of the Cincinnati Bengals. Dalton had a great year, passing for over 4,000 yards, put up 32 TD passes. Like some of the other quarterbacks I mentioned on this list, he just has to cut down on the turnovers and silly mistakes. Those turnovers and costly mistakes hurt his numbers in the end, but he has one of the top wide receivers in the league in A.J. Green. And as long as the offense has made progress from which I've seen, they certainly have. You have Marvin Jones, another young wide receiver who made a lot of plays out there last year, as well as tight ends Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert. You also have dual threat running back Giovanni Bernard. And so I certainly like what Andy Dalton can bring to the table for your fantasy football league. And if he can cut down on the turnovers, certainly he can be another guy like Matt Stafford, who you may see move up this list immensely. Next in line, you have Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. We all know Wilson led the Seahawks to the Super Bowl win last year versus the Denver Broncos. It was Wilson's second straight season of throwing for 26 TD passes. He also can get it done on the ground. I certainly expect for him to have more than one rushing touchdown, which would give his numbers a huge bump. We all know that Wilson is a very smart player who can get it done with his feet. He doesn't throw for a lot of interceptions. He's thrown for less than 10 interceptions in his first 2 years. He knows the system very well, and I certainly expect for Wilson to have another great season out in Seattle. Next in line, we have Josh McCown, a newcomer to this list. Last year, McCown was a backup quarterback for the Chicago Bears. This year, he'll be in Tampa Bay, and I love what he has at his disposal in the passing game. He has big 6'5" receiver Vincent Jackson, who has back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. They drafted wide receiver Mike Evans out of Texas A&M. He's a 6'6" target in the passing game. And then he also has some good tight ends with Brandon Myers, second-year player Tim Wright. And they went out and drafted Safarian Jenkins Austin. He's another 6'6" target. And then you factor in that they also have Doug Martin, Bobby Rainey, and Mike James in the backfield. And so I expect McCown to be a sleeper and put up some very good numbers in Tampa Bay. He's certainly a player. We'll be monitoring his progress throughout the season. Next in line, we have Carson Palmer of the Arizona Cardinals. Palmer is another player who, if he can cut down on his turnovers, it certainly could result to him moving up this list. He has future Hall of Famer Larry Fitzgerald at one wide receiver, and third-year guy Michael Floyd, who was able to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark last year. He also has dual threat Andre Ellington coming out the backfield to pass catch. They also brought in Teddy Ginn Jr. from the Carolina Panthers. They expect for him to step in the slot and help stretch the field with his blazing speed. So Carson Palmer is certainly a guy who you may be able to catch in later rounds. And again, if he can cut down on his turnovers, he's more than capable of being a good fantasy quarterback for you. To round out our tier of starting quarterbacks is none other than Cam Newton of the Carolina Panthers. Now look, Newton certainly has some obstacles stacked against him this year. He has all new wide receivers. There's not a single wide receiver who will be catching passes for Newton this year who was on the roster last year. So they're certainly going to have to develop some chemistry. His main target looks to be rookie Calvin Benjamin out of Florida State. He's a great 6'5" target. We'll see how he can fare in his first year. His other options are veterans Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant, guys who are on the tail end of their career but have sure hands and run good routes. And then Taquan Underwood, who was brought in as well. And so his top target this year may also likely be Greg Olsen, his tight end. As a matter of fact, I'm quite sure that's who his top target is going to be because he's the only player who's returning from last year. Olsen at 6'6" is a big target for Cam Newton, has a good speed and agility, is able to create separation against linebackers, and is a big red zone target. We also know that Newton can do a lot of damage on the ground running the football, and once inside the red zone, especially around the goal line, he certainly has the ability to put up a lot of touchdowns rushing the football. All right, that wraps up our first segment. Those quarterbacks we just went over are quarterbacks who are all capable of being the starting quarterback for your fantasy football team. When we come back from a quick commercial break, we'll go over our second tier of quarterbacks. These are the guys who more than likely you want to have as reliable backups, or guys who will be on a free agent wire and you want to see what they do in preseason to see if you want to have them as part of your team. It's the Firehouse with the NFLExporter live on Blaze1Radio. Thanks for returning, everybody. It's the NFLExporter, your host here on the Firehouse Sports Talk Show on Blaze1Radio. You're listening to the debut show, and make sure to join us each and every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. where we'll be burning it down, talking NFL and fantasy football. Now we're going to get into our second tier of quarterbacks. Again, these are quarterbacks who I don't see as starters, but should certainly be reliable backups. You definitely need to have a good backup quarterback in case your starter gets hurt or may come against a very tough matchup. We start off with Ryan Tannehill of the Miami Dolphins. Last year, Tannehill threw for 3,913 yards and 24 TDs. It was really the 17 interceptions and 6 fumbles that hurt his numbers. But he has Mike Wallace and Brian Hartline, two very good targets at wide receiver. And I really like tight end Charles Clay. They're going to need a third wide receiver to step up and make some plays. But Ryan Tannehill is certainly a guy who should be a good backup quarterback this year. Next, we have Sam Bradford of the St. Louis Rams. Bradford is certainly an underrated guy. He's a player who's got to stay healthy. Bradford, without question, has pinpoint accuracy, but thus far in his early NFL career, he's been marred by injuries and just hasn't been able to stay on the field. Last year, he missed the last 9 games of the season, but when he was in the lineup, he was very accurate, throwing 14 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. If he can stay on his feet, the Rams have a good running game, and Bradford could certainly be a guy to step into your lineup occasionally and put up some good numbers for you. Next in line, we have Big Ben Roethlisberger of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Roethlisberger threw for 28 TDs last year, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to look to run the football a lot this year and get back to their original identity. But we know that Roethlisberger is certainly able to put up the numbers. He has one of the top targets in the NFL in Antonio Brown. And when necessary, we know that Ben can make plays with his feet, which causes the defense to scramble. And that's when Roethlisberger is at his best, delivering darts down the field to open receivers. Big Ben is certainly a certified quarterback in this league. He's won 2 Super Bowls, been to another, and has shown over the years that he certainly is well worth a pickup to have on your lineup. Next in line, we have Alex Smith of the Kansas City Chiefs. Smith is a guy who didn't put up huge numbers, but was very accurate with the football. The thing you like about Smith is that he doesn't do a lot of turnovers. He only has 15 interceptions in over his last 1,100 attempts. Last year, he threw for 23 TDs and only 7 interceptions. And so he's certainly a guy who will be available in later rounds. Again, we wouldn't count him as a starter, but certainly will be a good spot play. Next in line, we have Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens. Flacco is certainly a player. Again, if he can cut down on turnovers, you may see him move up this list a little bit. Look, the Baltimore Ravens struggled mightily last year running the football, but Flacco didn't have a lot of passing options. This year, that certainly has changed. He has Torrey Smith, who's one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. They brought over Steve Smith, the veteran from the Carolina Panthers, who's certainly capable of making plays. Dennis Pitta, his top tight end, missed the majority of last season. He'll be back healthy. They brought in Owen Daniels, another good tight end from the Houston Texans. And second-year player Marlon Brown had a good rookie campaign. He'll certainly be able to go out and make plays. And then when you look at what the Ravens are going to do on the ground game, that's uncertain. And so I certainly like what Joe Flacco can bring to the table if he's able to cut down on turnovers. Certainly should be a steady play at backup quarterback for your team. Next in line, we have Eli Manning. Manning certainly has become turnover prone. Last year, with his 25 interceptions, it was the second time in 4 years he's had over 20 interceptions. And so the main thing I'm looking at here is the NFC East division is weak. The Giants' defense is weak as well. They're in that division, and so there's certainly going to be a lot of opportunity for Manning to put up big yards, which he always does. He's always thrown for over 4,000 yards. Like I said, the interceptions and fumbles have haunted him, but he certainly still has Victor Cruz, who's one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. Ruben Randall's a guy who'll be stepping up, and rookie Odell Beckham Jr. is expected to make some contributions as well. And so Eli Manning is another guy, again, you don't want to start, but certainly should be a good play for certain matchups throughout the NFL season. Next in line, we have Matt Schaub. After being ran out of Houston, Schaub has a chance for redemption with the Oakland Raiders. Look, Schaub is not a guy I'm expecting to put up a lot of yards. They're expecting him to thrive in play action, which is his main calling card. He certainly has some good options in the passing game. They brought over James Jones from the Green Bay Packers. Denarius Moore is a speedster and certainly has had some good NFL seasons in his young career. And Rod Streeter's a guy who I really like at wide receiver as well. If the Oakland Raiders can run the ball effectively with newcomer Maurice Jones-Drew and Darren McFadden, I certainly think Schaub is in line to be effective a couple weeks out of the season. Schaub has always been a player to put up big numbers, even though it may not equate to wins for his team. Next in line, we have E.J. Manuel of the Buffalo Bills. Manuel is a guy who, if he uses his weapons properly, certainly can have a good year for you. He has C.J. Spiller, Fred Jackson, and Bryce Brown at running back, 3 capable running backs. His passing options, the Bills went out this year and drafted top prospect Sammy Watkins from the Clemson Tigers. Watkins has been spectacular so far this preseason, so he's certainly a player you want to keep your eyes on. Also has second-year player Robert Woods from USC, and they brought over Mike Williams from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He also has reliable tight end Scott Chandler, who caught over 50 balls last year. Now, Manuel's only in his second year, and so he certainly has to improve on his decision-making, his accuracy, and just getting more familiar with playing in the NFL. But again, if he made progress and can use his weapons properly and make smart decisions, Manuel's a guy who can also run. He certainly may prove to be viable a couple weeks for your fantasy team. Next in line, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Houston Texans. Fitzpatrick played very effectively last year in the backup role for the Tennessee Titans. He has all-pro receiver Andre Johnson at one wide receiver. He has second-year guy DeAndre Hopkins, who certainly had a good rookie campaign. I expect for the Texans to have to pass the ball a lot this year. And Fitzpatrick is another player who, if he can keep the turnovers down, certainly will be a nice pickup for your fantasy team in the backup role position. Next in line, we have Geno Smith of the New York Jets. Like E.J. Manuel, he's in his second year and went through the same struggles that Manuel did last year. Now, he was able to stay healthy, unlike E.J. Manuel, but for every good game that he had, he had a bad or shaky game. So he has to improve on his consistency. Now, I don't really care for the Jets' passing options. They did go out and sign Eric Decker, who was with the Denver Broncos last year. He certainly should help them out. They also have Stephen Hill, who's a speed guy, but he struggles with his hands, so he has to improve on that. And then Jeremy Curley. Is a player who I like in the slot, has a lot of grit, is a tough player, and certainly can make plays in the open field. And so I think if Geno Smith can just, again, keep his turnovers down. I know you're hearing that as a common theme, but when it comes to points in fantasy football, that's the difference between a 20-point and a 15-point game. I certainly think Geno Smith, if he improves, can be a good player for your team in a few games throughout the season. Next in line, this is a guy who you want to keep your eyes on. Now, Teddy Bridgewater was drafted out of University of Louisville to the Minnesota Vikings. Right now, he's in a battle with Matt Cassell for that starting position. But we just seen yesterday his head coach that he's playing at a real high level. And out of all the rookie quarterbacks that got drafted this year, he's certainly the player who looks most likely to start. And if that is the case, I like the weapons and foundation that Bridgewater has around him. He has all-pro running back Adrian Peterson running the football, so you know the defenses have to crowd the box and respect the run, and also respect play-action pass. Bridgewater also would have second-year player Cordell Patterson at wide receiver. Patterson is one of the most exciting young players in the NFL, and I've heard nothing but good things coming out in training camp about him. He has veteran Greg Jennings on the other side. We know that Jennings has lost a step, but certainly is an excellent route runner and has excellent hands. In the slot, he'll have Jerome Simpson. I really like his ability. And then Kyle Rudolph is an underrated tight end in the NFL. But Rudolph caught 9 TD passes in the 2012 season. And I certainly expect for Bridgewater, if he can make smart decisions on the field, he has a big arm and may be a fantasy football surprise. Next in line, we have Cleveland Browns quarterback Brian Hoyer. Like Cam Newton, the only returning target that he has to his repertoire from last season is tight end Jordan Cameron. Now, when you look at what's going on here, they lost top target Josh Gordon, who led the NFL in receiving yards last year and is definitely one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. He's going to be suspended this season due to off-the-field issues. So Hoyer's targets will be newcomers Nate Burleson, Miles Austin, and Lavelle Hawkins. Now, Hoyer was very effective last year, but certainly hasn't had enough games for us to really give an accurate description on what he brings to the table. But certainly, if he can be as accurate as he was with the football in the games that he played, if he can get protection, watch out for Hoyer being a sleeper. Now, he is battling with Johnny Manziel for that starting quarterback position, so I don't know how it's going to play out. But at least starting the season off, I expect for Brian Hoyer to be the starting quarterback. Next in line, we have Jake Locker of the Tennessee Titans. Locker hasn't been able to stay on the field due to injury. He also has been very inaccurate with the football and very sporadic. So consistency has to be there for Locker. I'm not too sold on the receivers he has as well. Kendall Wright is certainly a young receiver who had a good year last year. They also have veteran Nate Washington and second-year guy Justin Hunter. But it's really Locker's inability to pass the ball efficiently that makes me have question marks. He's certainly a guy who you have to really watch and see what you're going to get. I don't expect for Locker to be in a lot of lineups this year. And rounding us out is Chad Henne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Henne is another player who just doesn't have the weapons at his disposal. Justin Blackmon, who's one of the better young talents in the NFL, will be sitting out the entire season due to off-the-field issues. Ace Sanders, another young talented receiver, is going to miss some games due to off-the-field issues. They do have rookie Marquise Lee from the University of South Carolina. We'll certainly keep an eye on him in the preseason. And Cecil Shorts III has been a very good wide receiver in his first 2 years. We'll certainly be watching out for him to see what he brings to the table. But the Jaguars are the worst team in the NFL. Who knows, though? We'll keep our eye out for Henne. That offense is going to be on the field a lot. And if he doesn't make turnovers, who knows? He may put up some big yards. That rounds out our quarterbacks for fantasy football. When we return, we'll talk the running backs. It's the NFL Exporter live on Blaze1Radio. You're listening to the Firehouse Sports Talk Show. Welcome back, everybody. It's your host, the NFLExporter, live on Blaze1Radio with the Firehouse Sports Talk Show. We just finished up our fantasy football quarterback ranking, so let's go ahead and jump into the running backs. First, you have Adrian Peterson of the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think too much needs to be said about this guy. Adrian Peterson has averaged over 1,300 yards and 11 TDs throughout his 7-year NFL career. He'll have some extra motivation and a chip on his shoulder, as he was called out by the Philadelphia Eagles running back Shady McCoy, who said he's the best running back in the NFL. Peterson is just going to continue to put up the big numbers. He'll still be the top running back coming off my board for fantasy football drafts this year. Next in line, we have Jamal Charles of the Kansas City Chiefs. Charles had the best season in fantasy football last year at the skill positions. He was able to score 19 total touchdowns. He caught 7 TD passes, ran for another 12. This guy was nothing short of spectacular. He'll continue to be the workhorse for the Kansas City Chiefs this season. I have him coming in at number 2. If you have him on your team, the Chiefs have one of the best offensive lines in the football. He'll certainly continue to have a heavy dose of touches and be very effective. I love Jamal Charles. Next in line, it's my man, Rappin' Forte. That's right, Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears. Last year, Forte had over 1,300 yards rushing and ranked second in all-purpose yards in the NFL. This year, he'll continue to prosper. He has 2 great receivers, and the Chicago Bears offensive line is finally together. Matt Forte is certainly a running back who will produce for your fantasy football lineup this year. Next, we have Shady McCoy of the Philadelphia Eagles. LaShawn led the NFL in rushing last year with over 1,600 yards. He's a human highlight reel out there, real reminiscent of Barry Sanders as far as his open field moves. He's in his 2nd year in Chip Kelly's wide spread offense. Shady McCoy is certainly a running back that you don't want to sleep on and will put up big numbers for your fantasy football team. Next, we have Eddie Lacy of the Green Bay Packers. As a rookie last year, he had 1,178 rushing yards and 11 TDs, and that was without a healthy Aaron Rodgers for 7 games. With Rodgers back in the lineup, I certainly expect a big year for Lacy, who should certainly benefit scoring a lot of rushing touchdowns, as we expect for Green Bay to be in the red zone and in the goal line area a lot. Next in line, now we want to look out here. Now we have Marshawn Lynch, and it's not about his talent. Lynch has averaged over 1,300 yards and double-digit TDs the last 3 years in Seattle. But Lynch was very unhappy coming into training camp this year, to the point where he held out for a couple days. Now he is back with Seattle, but it doesn't look like the Seahawks are planning on re-signing him. His unhappiness came from a lot of Seahawk players receive huge contract extensions in the offseason, and rightfully so. Lynch wants to be paid, because if it wasn't for him running the football as effectively as he's done for Seattle, that Seahawks team probably would not have won the Super Bowl last year. And so even though he's playing, it's probably due to not wanting to lose money for sitting out. I don't know how motivated and hungry he'll be. It could work out one of 2 ways. He could have a monster season if he wants to show GMs across the NFL that he still got in and worked it. But at the same token, if he's unhappy and unmotivated, I'm not sure what you'll get from Lynch. So you certainly want to keep an eye on his developments in the preseason. Try to listen to some interviews, which may be hard because he's a player who really doesn't talk to the media a lot. And, you just want to monitor what the vibe is out there, because if he gets drafted high, which again, if everything was fine, if he was happy, he certainly would have been the number 6 rated running back coming into the season. Next in line, a surprise here, we have Monty Ball of the Denver Broncos. Now, even though Ball is in his 2nd year, he's playing with Peyton Manning in that explosive Denver Broncos offense. And so he's certainly set up for success. Last year, the main running back for this team, Noshawn Moreno, who's now with the Miami Dolphins, had 1,586 total yards with 13 total TDs. If Ball can stay healthy, I certainly expect for him to be able to put up those type of numbers, and those are certainly numbers that are worth a top 10 running back pick in fantasy football. Next in line, I have DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys. Murray, when healthy, has shown that he can be one of the top running backs in the NFL. Last year in 14 games, he had 1,121 yards and 9 rushing TDs. The Dallas Cowboys offense certainly will be on the football field a lot. He doesn't have a lot of experience behind him at running back. and the defenses in his division are weak. And so if he can stay healthy, DeMarco Murray will be a great pickup for your ball club. Next in line, we have Alfred Morris of the Washington Redskins. Morris has done nothing less than run for over 2,800 yards and 20 rushing TDs in his first 2 years in Washington. And with a healthy RG3 under center and two big weapons at wide receiver, I certainly expect for Alfred Morris to continue to thrive and be a great running back for your team this year. Next in line is Arian Foster, a player who came into last season being a top 3 running back, and rightfully so. The only question marks that we have about Foster is just making sure that he's back 100% healthy. He's had back surgery last year, and so we know at any given time maybe a major shot could cause that to flare up again. And then Gary Kubiak, who was the team's head coach and was running the zone blocking scheme, is no longer with the Texans. And so if they change the way that they're going to be blocking, that possibly could cause Foster to have a hit. But he's certainly a player who's excelled in the goal line. And if healthy, I certainly expect him to get back on track and is still a top 10 running back. Next, we have C.J. Spiller of the Buffalo Bills. You're hearing a common theme here with these running backs. Again, if Spiller can stay healthy, he's certainly one of the most explosive players in the NFL. When healthy, which was in 2012, he ran for over 1,100 yards. He has a second-year quarterback at wide receiver, so you know he'll get the touches. Again, C.J. Spiller is a guy, if he can stay on the field, expect big things for Spiller this year. Next in line, we have Reggie Bush of the Detroit Lions. Bush was able to run for over 1,000 yards last year, and we all know that Bush is very effective catching the ball out of the backfield. Bush is another guy who has been hampered by injuries, but when he's on the field, he's certainly very effective. The Lions have one of the most high-powered offenses in the NFL. Watch out for Reggie Bush having another good year in Detroit. Next in line, we have Frank Gore of the San Francisco 49ers. Gore has continued to impress us year after year. He racked up another 1,000-yard season last year. The only reason that Gore is down a little bit on the board is because he tends to not score a lot of touchdowns or gets limited. I don't know if the 49ers like to bring in other running backs to help keep their morale up, but Gore is certainly a guy, if he can, get multiple touchdowns, he certainly is worth moving up on the board. I really like what Frank Gore has to offer, running behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and he also plays with a very mobile quarterback, so defenses have to respect that as well. Next in line, I have Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, the Steelers are going to look to get back to their identity, which is running the football a lot this year. Bell, after battling injuries, got off to a nice rookie campaign with 850 rushing yards and 7 TDs. Now that he'll be out there for a full season, I certainly expect for Bell to have an outstanding year. He should be a great value pick as far as where you can land him in the draft. Next in line, we have Zach Stacy of the St. Louis Rams. Like I mentioned for a couple other running backs on this list, has an excellent offensive line that he'll be running behind with All-Pro Jake Long at the tackle, as well as stud rookie Greg Robinson they brought in from Auburn, who'll be playing guard, and veteran Scott Wells. Now, the Rams don't have a lot of weapons in the passing game. I certainly expect for Stacy to improve on his 973 running yards and 7 TDs that he boasted as a rookie. Next in line, we have Chris Johnson of the New York Jets. We all know CJ2K got his name from when he ran for over 2,000 yards with the Tennessee Titans. And even though he's been really slowed a bit, really by poor quarterback play in Tennessee, it certainly wasn't with his individual ability. He certainly is still a very good player. He's one of the few players in NFL history to start off his career with 6 consecutive rushing yard seasons. My only concern here is the situation may be a little bit similar as it was in Tennessee. His starting quarterback looks to be second-year guy Geno Smith, which means the defenses are going to stack the box. He's going to be facing 7- and 8-man fronts a lot, and it makes it very difficult to run the ball when you have that many defensive players in the box, especially since the Jets don't have a lot of good wide receivers. And you also wonder, could his touches in the goal line get trimmed down a little bit by power running back Chris Ivory? Outside of that, Johnson is still one of the best running backs in the NFL, and I think he'll be a good pick because he'll be very motivated. The Titans didn't even trade him. They straight out cut him, and I think that, for some of these player pride is certainly a factor. So watch out for Chris Johnson this year with the Jets. Next in line, I have Giovanni Bernard of the Cincinnati Bengals. Bernard got off to a great start last year with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a dual threat running back. I like what he can do for you through the air as well. And Cincinnati has new offensive coordinator Hugh Jackson, who likes to run the ball a lot. So I certainly expect for Bernard to have a lot of touches. He's a dynamic playmaker, and if he gets in the open field, look out, because he has a lot of moves that he can put on you and leave you in the dust. Next in line, I have Andre Ellington, who may be a surprise to some, but he's with the Arizona Cardinals. His coach has already said that he's going to be a bell cow for this offense this upcoming season. And when you hear comments like that, that is certainly players that you target. Ellington has certainly shown explosion. He had an 80-yard TD run last year, can also catch the football out of the backfield, and so he's certainly a guy who's going to be getting a lot of touches, and that's certainly what you want out of your running backs and your players overall in fantasy football. Next in line. Now this is a combination. It's a little tricky. You have Stephen Ridley, running back for the New England Patriots. In 2012, he ran for over 1,200 yards and had 12 rushing TDs. But last year, he fumbled the ball a lot, and he found himself on the bench towards the end of the season. His counterpart is Shane Vereen. Now, Vereen's a very strong player. He can run the football, but we also know that New England likes to run a lot of spread sets, and he's a player who can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. And so he certainly gets a lot of snaps, even though he may not start. And so I think with both of these players, you want to kind of listen to what's going on in the preseason. I would say Vereen's a little bit more of a safer bet at this point due to his ability to catch the ball. But at the same token, if Ridley can hold the football, the Patriots certainly are able to run the ball effectively. So you certainly want to watch out for both those players. You even may want to go with a strategy where you draft them both just to ensure that you maximize their potential. Next in line, I have Doug Martin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he's a guy who's certainly looking to rebound from the strong rookie campaign he had. In his rookie season, he was able to run for over 1,300 yards and have double-digit TDs. Last year was a huge disappointment. He was a top 10 pick. He was only able to play 6 games, and in those 6 games, he only had 1 touchdown. If he's back to full health, I certainly expect for him to be able to put up some good numbers. You just want to watch and see what happens in the preseason to see how they expect to use him, because while he was out injured, a second-year running back, Mike James, who was a rookie last year, certainly impressed. When he went down with an injury, third-year player Bobby Rainey certainly was impressive. So now Tampa Bay has 3 legitimate running backs. You just want to watch to see if Martin is going to be the workhorse. Next in line, we have Ryan Matthews of the San Diego Chargers. Matthews finally was able to stay healthy, making it through all 16 games last year, and he was able to run for over 1,200 yards. If he can stay healthy again this season, you certainly expect for him to have a good season. And rounding out our list of starters, we have and that rounds out our list of starters. When we come back from a quick commercial break, we're going to finish going over our running backs. These are running backs who we expect to be basically your number 2 running back. Guys, it may not put up the big numbers every week, but certainly our starters, and will get more than their fair share of touches. And who knows what we see out of them in preseason, they may end up being in a larger role. It's the NFL Exporter live on Blaze1Radio. It's the Firehouse Sports Talk Show. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's the NFL Exporter on the Firehouse Sports Talk Show here on Blaze1Radio. Let's go ahead and take a look at our second tier of running backs, who again are running backs that you don't want to have as your number 1 running back, but certainly should be a good number 2 running back or possibly a good flex play. We're going to start off with the Oakland Raiders. Now, look, Darren McFadden, certainly a player, when healthy, has been able to put up the big numbers. He has some competition this year, though. Maurice Jones-Drew, who we all know well from his glory days with the Jacksonville Jaguars, is now with the Raiders. And so I don't know how that starting running back position or how the carries and workload are going to be split is going to be working out. But this is certainly something you want to watch because the Raiders do run the ball very effectively. Next in line, we have Lamar Miller of the Miami Dolphins. Now, last year, Miller was able to put up good numbers. He only had 177 carries, but put up 709 yards. Now, he's going to likely be in some type of timeshare as the Dolphins brought over Knowshon Moreno from the Denver Broncos. Moreno probably will take over third down as he's better at catching the ball to the backfield. He may even come in to run the ball from the goal line where he's shown to be effective. But Moreno has had injury issues, as is the case this year. He's going to sit out the preseason. And with it, Miller being more familiar with the Dolphins' running scheme, even though it is a new offensive coordinator, he'll get the playing time in the preseason. Miller is certainly a guy you want to keep your eye out on if he can get 20 to 25 carries or touches during the game. Next in line, we have Trent Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. Richardson got off to a great start in his early career with the Cleveland Browns, having a rookie campaign where he ran for 950 yards and 12 TDs. Completely fell off last year. Cleveland decided to part ways with him early, and once he arrived to Indianapolis, obviously when he had to take time to learn the playbook and get more familiar, so he certainly didn't have a good season last year, but he has had the whole off season to work. He's another player who we've already heard is very motivated in the preseason, and if he can get back to the form that we've seen him in his rookie year, he may be a sleeper pick and put up some good numbers out in Indianapolis. Next in line, we have Pierre Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. Now, Thomas is certainly another player you want to watch to see what his production and his workload looks like based off of the preseason. He has Mark Ingram, who's behind him. Ingram came on very strong at the end of last season, so I'm not quite sure who's going to get the majority of reps. But Thomas is a veteran. He's also very good at catching the ball out of the backfield. We know that New Orleans likes to run the ball a lot, and so Pierre Thomas is a sleeper guy who may be able to give you some good production. Next in line, we have Ray Rice of the Baltimore Ravens. We know that Rice had his worst season as a pro last year, and it was really a shock. I mean, Rice was a guy who was coming in, putting up Pro Bowl type numbers in 4 prior seasons, and last year it just fell through the roof. He only averaged 3 yards, wasn't even able to eclipse over 650 yards rush, 660 yards rushing. It was just pathetic. There was no excuse for it. He's going to miss the first couple games of this season, has been receiving a lot of criticism over the 2 games he suspended. A lot of people feel there should be more because there was domestic violence involved in the situation. And we know that a lot of times when it comes to work, if your mind is not in it, you don't produce. Now, they do have a new offensive coordinator in Gary Kubiak, bringing over that zone blocking scheme, which we've seen running backs in the NFL excelling. But you're going to really have to taper Rice. He's certainly a player I would use caution when drafting him. Next in line, we have Rashad Jennings of the New York Giants. Now, Jennings certainly showed a lot of hopping and step last year, replacing Darren McFadden, who I spoke on for the Oakland Raiders when he was out injured. Jennings now is going to look to carry a lot of the workload for this New York Giants team, who we're used to seeing passing a lot, but I think they're going to try to run the ball and do a lot more safer passing plays. Jennings can catch out the backfield. Watch out for Rashad Jennings. He may be a very good fantasy player for your team if he's able to get some good blocking from that front line. Next in line, we have D'Angelo Williams of the Carolina Panthers. Williams certainly has lost a step, but with the Panthers not having a lot of proven wide receivers, they're certainly going to try to run the ball a lot. His backup, Jonathan Stewart, is very injury prone, and so if the offensive line can block effectively, D'Angelo Williams is certainly a guy who should be able to give you some random production throughout the course of the NFL season. Next in line, we have Ben Tate of the Cleveland Browns. I really am not too high on Tate right now. He certainly has shown flashes in Houston, but I think running back is one of the most difficult positions that you want to that you see players try to come over and adjust because he has to learn a new offensive line. And when you look at what the Browns have to offer in the passing game, it certainly doesn't scare anyone. So he's another player who doesn't show a lot of speed, has some good agility, but there's going to be teams are really going to be focused on stopping the run and stopping tape. And so, I'm not really too high on him, but watch for him in the preseason. If him and that offensive line can click, they're certainly going to be looking to run the ball a lot in Cleveland, and he certainly should get the goal line carries. Next in line, I have Sean Green, who is slated as the starter, but Bishop Sankey is the guy who I'm looking at here. At some point, getting a starting running back role for the Tennessee Titans. Sankey is a rookie out of Washington. The Titans certainly have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Again, the problem here is Jake Locker and that receiving core doesn't scare anybody. So like Chris Johnson, like Ben Tate, you're going to see defenses focusing on stopping the run, and that could possibly hinder the production from Green or Sankey. And then we also have Toby Gerhart from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gerhart's in a similar situation. The Jaguars are the worst team in the NFL. He's certainly going to get a lot of touches, but I'm just not sure how effective that Jacksonville Jaguars offense can be with the lack of skill production they'll get out of their skilled players. But with that being said, he's going to get the ball a lot and certainly be a guy who takes it in from the goal line whenever the Jacksonville Jaguars are down there. Some other guys I certainly want to make mention of before we wrap up our running backs here. Darren Sproles of the Philadelphia Eagles. Mark Ingram, I mentioned, of the New Orleans Saints. Joyke Bell with the Detroit Lions. LeGarrette Blount with the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he can stay healthy, Jonathan Stewart of the Carolina Panthers. Fred Jackson of the Buffalo Bills. Noshawn Moreno with the Miami Dolphins. Bernard Pierce, who will be starting the first 2 games of the season, and Ray Rice is absent with the Baltimore Ravens. Maurice Jones-Drew, as we mentioned, could be battling Darren McFadden for the starting spot out in Miami. Danny Woodhead is a good spot start for the San Diego Chargers. If anything happens to Monty Ball, Ronnie Hillman will be the next player up for the Denver Broncos in that explosive offense. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis of Cincinnati, James Starks of Green Bay, Roy Halou of the Washington Redskins, and Ahmad Bradshaw, certainly a couple other players that you want to keep your eyes on in fantasy football. That wraps up our running back segment. It's the NFL Exporter, Blaze1Radio. You're now tuned in to the debut show of the Firehouse. We'll be right back, and we're going to jump into our last rankings for the week, which are our wide receivers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for returning to the Firehouse Sports Talk Show here on Blaze1Radio. It's your host, the NFL Exporter. We've just covered our quarterbacks and our running backs. Let's go ahead and get into our wide receiver rankings. Without question, Calvin Johnson is the top wide receiver in the NFL, was actually ranked as the number 2 player overall in the NFL by his counterparts. So that should just tell you how much respect this guy gets. Calvin Johnson continues to be a stunner. He certainly should be the top wide receiver taken off the board for the Detroit Lions. Next in line, we have Demaryius Thomas of the Denver Broncos. He is Peyton Manning's number 1 target, and with back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, he's definitely shown that he'll go out and put up the big numbers for you. Certainly a guy who has the ability to take you to the house from anywhere on the football field. You got to love what he brings to the table. Next in line, I have Dez Bryant of the Dallas Cowboys. Bryant will certainly be the top target for the Dallas Cowboys this year. We know they're going to be in a lot of shootouts. He was able to score 13 TDs last year and put up over 1,200 yards. I certainly expect another big year from Dez Bryant out in Dallas. Next in line, we have A.J. Green of the Cincinnati Bengals. Green just completed his 3rd straight 1,000-yard campaign. He is Andy Dalton's number 1 target in Cincinnati. I expect nothing less than another spectacular year from A.J. Green and the Cincinnati Bengals. Next in line, we have Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons. Jones missed the last 11 games of last year with an injury, but prior to that, He was on pace for 130 catches and over 1,800 yards. Now, we know that Roddy White, his counterpart at wide receiver, is back this year, which you think may hit his numbers a little bit, but they will be without future Hall of Famer tight end Tony Gonzalez, who was getting a lot of passes thrown his way. So you expect if Julio Jones can stay healthy, and that is a big if, because he has fought injuries a little bit in his first 3 years in the NFL. You can certainly expect Jones to put up the big numbers. He's very motivated and spoke a little bit earlier this season saying he feels he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. And for what I've heard this year in Falcons training camp, he certainly looks very good. Next in line, we have Brandon Marshall of the Chicago Bears. Marshall continues to impress as he put up his 7th consecutive 1,000-yard season last year for the Bears. Jay Cutler, his quarterback, he's certainly his top target. The Bears' offense is very explosive. You have Brandon Marshall as your starting wide receiver. You certainly feel good about that. Next in line, we have Andre Johnson of the Houston Texans. Johnson just came off of another 1,400-yard season. The only disappointment you see with Johnson sometimes is that he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, but he also always puts up the big yards. They have a new quarterback in Houston. That franchise is really rebuilding after a 2-14 season last year, and I certainly expect for Johnson to continue to be a big playmaker for that Houston Texans team. If you have Dre on your roster, start him with confidence. Next in line, I have Vincent Jackson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jackson continues to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Just finished another 1,000-yard season. He has new quarterback Josh McCown in town, and you know that McCown is going to be looking for Jackson often. And Vincent Jackson at 6'5" is definitely a big-time threat in the red zone. Vincent Jackson is certainly a guy on Tampa Bay that you'd like to have on your team. Next in line, I have Keenan Allen of the San Diego Chargers. Allen burst onto the scene last year as a rookie once he was able to get into the starting lineup and never look back. He was the only rookie to go over 1,000 yards last year. We know that San Diego likes to air the ball out with Phillip Rivers. Allen now is the number 1 guy in San Diego. I expected for him to have an outstanding season. Next, we have Alshon Jeffries of the Chicago Bears. He was opposite of Brandon Marshall in that explosive Bears offense. Had over 1,400 yards of receiving to be one of the top receivers in the NFL last year. He's only entering his 3rd year. You know that Jay Cutler is going to be looking his way a lot. You certainly like Alshon Jeffrey to put up big numbers for you this year. Next in line, I have Jordy Nelson of the Green Bay Packers. Nelson continues to be a top target for precision passing Aaron Rodgers out in Green Bay. I expect nothing less from Nelson. He should certainly be able to get you over 1,000 yards and 10+ TDs as long as Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy this year. Next in line, Wes Welker of the Denver Broncos. He continues to be the top slot wide receiver in the NFL. Again, when Peyton Manning is your quarterback, and we know that Welker lines up in that slot and just gives defenses fit, he's going to have a ton of targets and put up the big numbers. Welker had struggled with TD catches coming into last season, but with Peyton Manning at quarterback, he was able to get double digits. That certainly won't be a problem, as he's one of Manning's favorite options in the red zone. Next in line, Roddy White of the Atlanta Falcons. Last year, White struggled big time with injuries to start the season, but when he was healthy towards the end of the year, he put up the numbers. He's certainly a favorite target of Matty Ice as well, even though Julio Jones is younger and faster and more of a physical specimen. We know that Roddy White has the longest running rapport with QB Matty Ice, so Roddy White is certainly a good fit for your fantasy football team. Next in line, Randall Cobb of the Green Bay Packers. Cobb was having a big year prior to being hurt last year. Was able to return at the end of the season. He's another guy that if he can stay healthy, he's more than capable of putting up big fantasy numbers for your football team. Next, Pierre Garçon of the Washington Redskins. Garçon had over 100 catches for over 1,300 yards. Now that he has Deshaun Jackson on the other side of him, it's going to spell trouble. These defenses are going to have to stop somebody, and I certainly expect for Garçon to have another big year with Robert Griffin III being back to full health out in Washington. Next in line, Larry Fitzgerald, the future Hall of Famer for the Arizona Cardinals, is still kicking at a high rate. He is certainly Carson Palmer's favorite target, a big-time red zone threat, and I certainly expect for Larry Fitzgerald to be back on track with over 1,000 yards. The only thing you watch out, he plays in that rough and rugged NFC West, so sometimes the matchups are difficult, playing the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers twice a year, but Larry Fitzgerald is still one of the best in the business. You got to like what he brings to the table. Next, I have Michael Crabtree of the San Francisco 49ers. When Crabtree's been able to be on the field, he's certainly a top target of Colin Kaepernick. Like Fitzgerald, he's in that same division. You know, there's 4 top 10 defenses in that NFC West. He'll be facing the Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks twice a year. But Crabtree is certainly a player with excellent hands, ability to run after the catch. And if he can stay on the field this year, I really like what Michael Crabtree can do for your fantasy football team. Next in line, Antonio Brown of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though the Steelers are going to be looking to run the ball a lot this year, Brown is certainly the top target for Ben Roethlisberger. Last year, Brown had 1,499 yards, over 100 catches. I'm not sure if he can duplicate those numbers, but he'll certainly get over 1,000 yards, and hopefully he can increase on his touchdown production. I really like what Antonio Brown brings to the table as the Steelers' top receiving target. Next in line, Deshaun Jackson of the Washington Redskins, again with the healthy RG3 and a big-time player in Pierre Garçon on the other side. We know Jackson himself had over 1,300 yards receiving last year, still has top-end speed, and is one of the most electrifying players in the NFL. Watch out for Deshaun Jackson in his first year in Washington. He'll certainly be in position to post some big numbers. Next in line, we have Cordell Patterson of the Minnesota Vikings. The second-year player is in line for a big year. Greg Jennings, who's a veteran in this league, has already said that he'll be telling his kids that he played with Patterson when his kids grow up. I've been hearing nothing but stellar things coming out of training camp from this guy. And as long as he doesn't get too cocky or carried away, continues to work hard and stay focused, Cordell Patterson is going to be an excellent pickup for your fantasy football team this year. Next in line, we have T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts. Hilton is a speedster. He's improved year by year with Andrew Luck. They're coming into their third year together as they were drafted together. And Hilton certainly developed a lot of confidence from Luck last year in Reggie Wayne's absence. He's a guy who can strike from deep out. I really like T.Y. Hilton and the progress he's made over the years. Should be a big-time player this year if he can improve on being consistent. Next, we have Torrey Smith of the Baltimore Ravens. He'll certainly be the top passing option for Joe Flacco in the passing game. And with a healthy Dennis Pitta back in the lineup with the addition of Steve Smith from the Carolina Panthers, I certainly like what Torrey Smith's prospects look like for your fantasy football team this year. Next in line, we have Mike Wallace of the Miami Dolphins. Now look, Wallace certainly struggled with some key drops last year and inconsistency. It was certainly inexcusable. I know he's a guy who has pride and really wants to work hard. If him and Ryan Tannehill can connect on the deep ball, in which Tannehill overthrew him a lot last year, Wallace is certainly a player of putting up some big fantasy numbers for your team this year. Next in line, I have Victor Cruz of the New York Giants. Cruz had his worst season since he burst on the scene and started putting up 1,000-yard seasons with the Giants. That was primarily due to the Giants' struggles overall. Now look, this Giants offense certainly isn't too impressive this year on paper, and so you just want to watch where you draft Cruz and watch what goes on in the preseason, because if that Giants offense struggles again, Cruz is certainly a player whose struggles are going to come attached with that. Next in line, we have Jeremy Maclin. Now look, Maclin is a guy who there's some mixed reviews about him, and it certainly doesn't have to do with what he's capable of, but he's battled injuries. And so in that respective regard, if he can stay on the football field, he's certainly going to be capable of putting up some big numbers in this Chip Kelly spread offense. But if he's not out there on the football field, it could be another disappointing year for people who invest their fantasy pick in him. Next in line, I have Marcus Colston of the New Orleans Saints. Now look, the Saints have lost some key receivers. They lost running back Darren Sproles, who was catching 77 balls a year. They lost Lance Moore, who was a productive receiver. They also lost Devery Henderson. With that being the case, without question, Colston is coming in as the solidified number one wide receiver on his team this year. And outside of big tight end Jimmy Graham, I certainly expect for Colston to get a bulk of targets. He hasn't put up the numbers consistently over the last few seasons, but I think this year is the opportunity that you could see him break out. Next in line, I have Reggie Wayne of the Indianapolis Colts. Now look, Wayne is a guy who certainly was putting up a lot of big numbers, being the main focus of young quarterback Andrew Luck. But he's coming off of an injury, and like I said, T.Y. Hilton has stepped his game up. He's also going to have, basically there's more players that Luck can spread the ball around to. But with that being said, Wayne is one of the best in the business. He certainly at this point looks to have some future Hall of Fame numbers. He's lost a step, but speed was really never his calling card. Every other aspect, like Larry Fitzgerald, he's adept in route running, great hands, knows how to get his body in position. And so make sure Wayne is healthy in the preseason. If that's the case, he certainly would be a nice pickup for your team. Next in line, I have a couple slot guys who, if they can stay healthy, should be pay dividends. Percy Harvin of the Seattle Seahawks. We know that anytime he gets his hands on the ball, he's a dangerous weapon. Last time we seen him in the closest capacity to a full season was 2012 for Minnesota. Before being injured, was leading the NFL in catches. Had 9 TD catches. He's a guy who can run the ball as well. And so Percy Harvin, you don't want to draft him too high. But again, if he can stay healthy, this is a guy who will pay big benefits for your fantasy football team. Another guy is Danny Amendola. Came over to the New England Patriots last year to take the place of Wes Welker, who went to Denver. We know when Welker was healthy, Tom Brady was hitting him off time after time after time again. Amendola struggled with injuries as he did as a St. Louis Ram. He's another guy, though, with Tom Brady's pinpoint accuracy. If he can stay healthy, Amendola should be a good pickup for your team. All right, that wraps up really kind of my first level of wide receivers, guys who I would consider as 1 and 2 starters. When we come back from a quick commercial break, we're going to go over the rest of the wide receivers, and there are certainly some guys capable that we're going to talk about depending on how the cards play out for them. It's the Firehouse Sports Talk Show, NFL Exporter, Blaze1Radio. Don't touch that dial. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's the NFL Exporter. We've been having a great debut show so far here on the Firehouse Sports Talk Show on Blaze1Radio. We're going to wrap up this segment in the show by taking a look at the rest of our wide receivers. Now, these are players, again, who I wouldn't draft high. You may not want to depend on them as your starting wide receiver tandem, but these are certainly players who, if they can, make some strides in the preseason, and it just really depends on how the cards play out for them, but they certainly have talent. So let's go ahead and take a look at these guys. Players I'm going to mention: Emmanuel Sanders, Denver Broncos. Eric Decker put up over 1,200 yards and 12 TDs last year. He'll be taking his place. He's with Peyton Manning, and especially if starter Demaryius Thomas were to miss any times, Emmanuel Sanders is definitely a guy who you want to have on your roster in late rounds. Michael Floyd of the Arizona Cardinals, the third-year player opposite Larry Fitzgerald, had over 1,000 yards last year, only 5 TDs, so you didn't feel the effects. If he can pick that number up, maybe another excellent pickup for your team. Marvin Jones, I absolutely love this guy. He should be starting opposite A.J. Green this year. In limited time last year, had 10 TD receptions, continues to develop rapport with Andy Dalton. I certainly like Marvin Jones for the Cincinnati Bengals. Next in line, we have Riley Cooper of the Philadelphia Eagles. He's certainly a player who has a great connect with starting QB Nick Foles. Isn't the fastest guy, but outside of that, he continues to get it done on a weekly basis. Watch out for Riley Cooper this year and what he can bring to the table for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Quan Bolden certainly showed he still had a lot of gas left in the tank. He'll be starting opposite receiver Michael Crabtree. Excellent possession receiver and red zone threat. The 49ers offense is going to be very explosive this year, and Quan Bolden is definitely a good player you want to have on your roster. Next in line, Julian Edelman of the New England Patriots. He was the most steady receiver last year for the New England Patriots. I don't expect anything different from this year. He'll definitely be a top target of quarterback Tom Brady. Next in line, we have Cecil Shorts of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We know that the Jaguars don't have a lot of offensive firepower. They have a horrible defense and will be on the field a lot. And in fantasy football, it doesn't matter when and where the numbers come in. With the Jaguars probably passing the ball a whole lot, Shorts may be a guy who puts up some big-time numbers for your fantasy football team. Next in line, Tavon Austin of the St. Louis Rams. Austin is another guy who'll be in that slot position. Struggled a bit, and I think it was due to Sam Bradford not being in the lineup. With Bradford's pinpoint accuracy, I certainly think that Tavon Austin is a player to keep your eye out for in the preseason. He's a guy who, if he gets one step in the open field, you might as well forget about it. Don't even chase him. You're going to be left in a cloud of smoke. Next in line, I have Sammy Watkins, the big-time rookie receiver out of Clemson for the Buffalo Bills. If he was on the team that had a better quarterback, his upside would be a lot more. We still have to see how it works out for him, but he certainly looks to be the top target for Buffalo coming in this year, as he's already been slated in as the number one wide receiver. Watch out for Sammy Watkins. He has top-end speed and big-time playmaking ability. Next in line, I have DeAndre Hopkins. He's a second-year receiver for the Houston Texans. The Texans really only have two viable wide receivers. I certainly expect for him and newcomer quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick to get on the same page. Teams are certainly going to be shifting coverage over to All-Pro Andre Johnson. DeAndre Hopkins is a guy who can pay some dividends for your fantasy football team. Next in line, I like Terrence Williams from the Dallas Cowboys. He's a guy who's going to be starting for Tony Romo out for the Cowboys. The NFC East division is weak on the defensive side of the football, and as we mentioned, Dallas is going to be in a lot of shootouts this year. He's certainly a guy who can catch in later rounds. In limited time last year, was able to put up 17 yards per catch and score 7 TDs. Next in line, I have Mike Evans, the big rookie receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, Josh McCown had two big 6'5", 6'6" wide receivers for the Chicago Bears and utilized them very well. McCown is now the starting quarterback for the Buccaneers, and I certainly expect for him to get the ball out to Evans a lot. Evans has good hands and certainly will be a big-time option in the red zone. Next in line, I have Jared Boykin of the Green Bay Packers. Now look, we know that Aaron Rodgers loves to go with 3 wide receiver sets. You know that Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb are going to attract a lot of attention, and especially if either one of them miss any playing time, Jared Boykin will be a solid step in, as he showed he's a very good young receiver when he got time to play last year in Randall Cobb's absence. Next in line, Eric Decker of the New York Jets. Decker, I don't expect for him to put up 1,200 yards and 12 TDs as he did with the Denver Broncos. But with that being said, he is the top receiving option for the Jets in the passing game. And if Geno Smith and him can develop some early chemistry, Eric Decker could be a nice fill-in on your fantasy roster. Another guy is Kelvin Benjamin. We're hearing a lot of good things out of him coming out of Carolina's camp. As we mentioned, Carolina has all new receivers this year, so he'll certainly have an opportunity to start. At 6'5", he's a huge target, especially in the red zone. If him and Cam Newton can get on the same page, I certainly expect for him to have a good year. He'll be a good spot play for your team as well. We're going to take one more quick commercial break. When we come back, you know at the wide receiver position, you got to have depth. I'm just going to throw out some other names out there for you to keep an eye on in the preseason. It's the NFLExporter Firehouse Sports Talk Show on Blaze1Radio. Everyone, welcome back, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up our segment in the show with the wide receiver position. And these are just some names you want to keep your eye out for in the preseason. They certainly have capability, should certainly have some games this season where they excel. And there are also players who, you know, if the starting guy, the main option on their team get hurt, could certainly step in and put up some numbers. I like Golden Tate. He'll be opposite Calvin Johnson in Detroit. I certainly like Kenny Stills as well as Brandon Cooks. Both of those players are in that pass-happy, explosive offense out in New Orleans with quarterback Drew Brees. We know Brees' accuracy is amongst the best in the business, so those two young players certainly can be some nice pickups. The same holds true for Aaron Dobson and Kimbrell Tompkins of the New England Patriots. Tom Brady's their quarterback. We know the Pats like to pass the ball a lot. Those two young players will certainly be on the field a lot. And in limited time, due to injuries and learning curve last year, Dobson had 6 TD catches and Tompkins 8. So certainly you want to have them as guys you consider to have on your roster. I certainly like Ruben Randall for the New York Giants. He'll be starting opposite Victor Cruz. You got to consider Brian Hartline. He's a sure-handed, good route-running possession receiver for the Miami Dolphins. Doug Baldwin should be a top option for the Seattle Seahawks this year. You also want to watch out for Javon Curse, who's another talented receiver making strides in the preseason for the Seahawks. Mike Williams is certainly a player who can pay some dividends for you with the Buffalo Bills. Greg Jennings is a guy in Minnesota who certainly may be a solid play. If he can get back to form, Dwayne Bowe is certainly a player capable. He's a top wide receiver in Kansas City, but his production has taken a huge hit the last couple years. I like the receivers for the Raiders. I think Rod Streeter is the guy you want to keep an eye out for, but certainly Denarius Moore and James Jones are two other wide receivers who can put up some numbers for you. Harry Douglas may be a good spot play for you out in Atlanta with the absence of Tony Gonzalez. Steve Smith, certainly a guy who can still do some damage every now and then for the Carolina Panthers. And then you have Miles Austin for the Cleveland Browns. He'll likely be the top receiving option there with Josh Gordon missing the season. Nate Washington, this crafty veteran, seems to have some big games throughout the NFL season. Hakeem Nicks could possibly do some damage with the Indianapolis Colts. Marquise Lee is the rookie for Jacksonville, who certainly will be on the field a lot and capable of putting up some numbers. And then Vincent Brown and Malcolm Floyd will be fighting for the number 2 starting receiver spot out in San Diego. We know the Chargers like to air it out. And then Chris Gibbons is a receiver for the St. Louis Rams, outside of Tavon Austin, who could possibly do some damage. And then rounding out this group, Jeremy Curley of the New York Jets, Ryan Broyles of the Detroit Lions. Marcus Wheaton is a guy who will be starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so certainly Antonio Brown will draw a lot of coverage, and Wheaton may be able to put up some numbers. Justin Hunter had a nice rookie campaign for the Tennessee Titans. And last but not least, Jordan Matthews is a wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm hearing good things about him. He certainly has an opportunity to start in the slot for the pass-happy, explosive Eagles offense, and if Jeremy Maclin were to go down with an injury, he's next in line to receive the production. That'll wrap up today's show. We had a great debut show here on Blaze1Radio. Again, make sure to burn it down with us each and every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. I'm your host, the NFLExporter. It's the Firehouse Sports Talk Show on Blaze1Radio. We'll catch you next week, 1100.